Hey, how's everybody doing? Doing all right? I think we're waiting on a few more people to hop on, but we're going to get started. So, yeah, we're really grateful and honored to have Brandon with us to talk a little bit more about storytelling, which is what these students have been doing for just a little bit like 5 weeks now. I think you guys have been with us virtually. So, I thought that Brandon would be a really good voice to talk more about his way of storytelling and his process as well as his experience with the Midwest. If you guys didn't know, Brandon's actually from Missouri, so he technically is from the Midwest. So definitely to hear his feedback and thoughts about the Midwest as well. But Brandon, I'll let you take it away with kind of intros, and then you can definitely talk as you please.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. First of all, this is really cool. I actually haven't done a lot of chats. I haven't done a lot of chats like this with students before. So usually I'm just talking to other filmmakers or social media people, YouTube, things like that. So it's nice to be here. And in case anyone's unfamiliar with what I do, I'm a filmmaker who makes short videos for the web. So I started out doing more traditional stuff. I worked in reality TV. Before that, I went to film school at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, which is a mouthful to say, but it's a UNCSA in Winston-Salem, and it's a pretty good film school. And yeah, I just after several years of doing the normal TV thing, I decided that I wanted to kind of be more independent, and I wanted to travel and see the world and kind of live that dream. So I found a way to make it happen. I started doing some commercial work in Dubai for Etihad Airways through connections with a friend. And I did basically web social media videos for them. And in my spare time doing that, I was able to travel around that area. So, I'm from the US, and I had never really been out to the Middle East before that. We're talking about 2013 at this point. And I realized that starting in Dubai as my hub, I was able to go to all these places that I never thought I would get to see in my entire life. And they were like a 2-hour flight away. So I could fly to Greece, I could fly to Bahrain, I could fly to, I flew to Australia, which was an 8-hour flight. And I ended up going to like, I don't know, 12 or 13 countries within my first year of doing work in Dubai. So that gave me all this inspiration to make, travel videos. So travel videos became my hobby. And then eventually I made a bunch of them, and a few of them got picked as staff picks on Vimeo, like the front page of Vimeo. And if you're not familiar with vimeo.com, it's where I think the best independent short films are being posted online. But basically, I got some staff recognition with those videos, which gave me a little bit of visibility. And then people started coming to me saying, hey, we want to hire you to do more travel videos. So that's kind of how the career in making internet videos started. And from that, I started doing social media stuff on the side. Like I started a YouTube channel. And over time, the YouTube channel has become almost like a 50-50 thing between in how I spend my time between doing like commercial work and work for brands, and then doing social media, YouTube, Instagram, that kind of stuff too. And I can make some cash by doing sponsored posts on YouTube and Instagram. So that's a side thing. And then my third thing that I do is I have an online film school, which is basically like a supercharged version of my YouTube channel, where I teach my method of making videos from beginning to end. So those are kind of the three things I do. I do branded work for brands as a director, and I have social media channels, and I have an online film school. So that is me. And is Missouri really Midwest? Missouri is the dead center of the country. It's the middle, actually. It's not even Midwest. It is the bullseye. And I grew up in Webster Groves, Missouri, which is the bullseye of the bullseye. And we were actually picked by Time Magazine to be featured as the quintessential American high school, to represent the absolute, like, what do you call it? Like a bellwether of the country. They're like, what is the most normal, average place in America to represent the entire country? And they sent out a bunch of journalists to cover our high school just because it was so unexceptional in that regard. We were the perfect average of everything. So yes, it's the Midwest, or the middle. So yeah, Oman, I went to Oman. I spent a week in Muscat filming, just personally for fun. That's really close to Dubai. So yeah, that's kind of what I've done. You know, I traveled around a whole bunch. I filmed a whole bunch of, you know, countries. I think I've been to 40 countries now. And basically I tried to experience the countries from as non-touristic a perspective as possible. And this was way before like travel videos were even, I guess, like a trend. Like now they're a huge trend on YouTube. I don't know if anybody watches those kinds of videos on YouTube, but it's become like a huge thing where everybody who has an Instagram account or a YouTube account goes and makes these travel videos that are like super glamorous about, you know, them standing on top of Range Rovers in deserts and that kind of thing. I started making videos before any of that was trending, and my videos were more inspired like directly by National Geographic and other kinds of journalistic coverage, but I just wanted to do a shorter, flashier version of that for the web. So that was my aesthetic that I always tried to go for, was the more grounded docu-journalistic / experimental artsy kind of approach. And favorite country, well, I mean, my favorite country to spend time in is Spain. I've been there probably 8 or 9 times. I made 5 videos about Spain, different kinds of videos. And it's just like the perfect confluence of like traditional culture that's still preserved, and they're still like sort of living that culture. It's a well-developed country, so the infrastructure is nice, which means I get to stay in nice hotels and drive on roads that are paved well and have air conditioning. And the people are friendly. I speak a little bit of Spanish. Basically, I speak like maybe a 4-year-old. And you know, it's just like, it's got so much beauty, and it's so fun to go there. Yet I feel like I'm not just living the tourist life when I go there. I'm able to actually dig into the culture and get to something real. Whereas a lot of countries that are fun to visit, I feel like I can't really get beneath that touristic surface and find anything with any like documentary grit to film. So Spain is kind of like, it's a nice mix of both worlds there. So yeah, I'm here to basically just answer any questions. I don't know if we have any agenda or anything, or, you know, Sam, if you want to say anything, but yeah, that's the intro to who I am and what I do.
Yeah, I'm sure that the students have some questions, both about your filmmaking process, your own journey, and also kind of your travels across the world. So I think if someone wants to just chime in right now, if anybody wants to start us off with the first question.
Favorite place in Spain, by the way, the Andalusia region is my favorite part of Spain. I haven't actually, that's not fair, because I haven't been to all of Spain. I haven't been to Valencia. I haven't been to the starts with the B. I'm blanking, but I've mostly been around the south of Spain. I've been to Catalonia. I've been to, you know, around Madrid. I've been to whatever. Basque Country, right? Basque Country. I can't believe I forgot that. I've spent a lot of time in Barcelona. For me, that city is too big and it's a little bit unfriendly and it's a little hostile toward tourists. Like they have graffiti that says "tourists go away." So, you know, I took that as a subtle hint that maybe they're a little bit over touristed. But I spent a lot of time in Sevilla. That's probably my favorite spot that I've been. I have not been out to the Canary Islands, and that would probably be the next place that I'd really want to spend time. But basically, like the culture in the Canary Islands is not quite as deep and historical from what I've seen as it is in Andalusia and some other parts of Spain. It's more like a lot of the buildings are newer, and it's been overrun by German tourists. Like Mallorca has become basically little Germany, so it's not quite the heart of Spain, I guess. And from my experience, sorry. So yeah, Caceres. Okay. I have not been to there, and I haven't actually heard of it, or Asturias. I haven't heard of either of those. So yeah, there's a lot I haven't seen in the country still. Even though I feel like I've been there, you know, and seen a lot, there's still so much in every country. I mean, that's like one of the main things I realized, I guess, when I started traveling for real, as opposed to just like taking week-long family trips, is like you take any country, you take any region, and maybe you have like a postcard image in your head before you go there. And then you go there and you realize that that postcard is actually just one tiny little pixel within the gigantic like expanse of that country. And, you know, like Paris, you may think of Eiffel Tower or whatever, but actually Paris, the city itself, has so many neighborhoods that it could take a lifetime to explore all of them. And that's just one city in France. And then the rest of France is huge outside of that. And there's so many other cities, and every city has neighborhoods, and every neighborhood has, regions outside of the neighborhood that you can explore in the countryside. And they've all got their traditions, they've all got their accents, they've all got their customs. And that's what makes it endlessly fascinating for me to travel and to make films, because you can just keep on, like, you can go to little pockets that most never go to and don't even think about, and find fascinating stories and fascinating people to film, and cultures that are different, especially in Europe where it's so old, cultures that have developed pre-car, pre-airplane. So people didn't travel outside of their little village for centuries. So like in Ireland, I think there's 11 recognized accents within one country. So that's just like amazing to me, because you don't have to travel very far to experience so much variety in human culture. So yeah. So how do I manage to know a country from a cultural perspective for my shots? Well, it's just about talking to local people. Nowadays, I go through social media first before I go to any place. I just post on Instagram. I'll post a story that says, hey, I'm going to this place. If anybody is from there, hit me up. Let's meet up. Let's have some coffee. Let's walk around. Let's, see your town, whatever you want to show me. So I just let people tell me how they view themselves and how they view their own city. And if I talk to enough people, like I made a video about Seoul, Korea a couple years ago, and I talked to probably 100 people before I started shooting, and I got each of their insights about Seoul. And these weren't all very long conversations, but I at least sat down and had like lunch, or I had like a quick phone call with about 100 people. And then I decided how I would portray Seoul. So it really came down to the in-person, just hanging out, talking, getting to know people. So how do I try to differentiate myself from other filmmakers? Well, it was easy 5 years ago when there weren't so many people making travel videos, but now the genre has become really crowded, and a lot of people are like following the same styles, I guess. And I've just basically tried to not push myself to constantly put out new.
Hey, Brandon, I think you went off for a little bit.
Yep. So I tried to stop talking
Okay.
because I
Yep.
saw everything freeze.
You're back.
I assume I'm back. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, so differentiating myself from other filmmakers, it's a matter of basically trying not to repeat what I've done before, I guess, and not to directly copy anybody else, and to constantly expose myself to new influences. So basically what I try to do is I try to keep the core of what I've done before and what I'm interested in, and then maybe mix in a little influence from somebody new who I just discovered on Vimeo or watching Netflix, or, from a movie I saw, whatever. I'll just take one aspect of what they do and I'll try to mix it in to what I do. And so I pollute myself a bit with other people's new, styles. And I try to basically make it part of my style. And, it's always a messy process, but that's about all I can say as far as staying different from other people.
Brandon, why don't you start with like talking about kind of your upbringing? I'm curious, I think some of these students as well, kind of growing up in the Midwest, your thoughts, and then how you kind of decided to branch out and do what you're doing right now.
So I guess I'm talking to just people from the Midwest right now, right?
No, there's people from California. There's some folks from all across the United States right now, 10 different states, students right now. And I think did you hear what I said, Brandon?
I lost about 20 seconds. Sorry about that. Maybe it's my connection here.
No problem. I said there's about 10 different states represented in today, 10 different universities, 10 different states. So there are some students in Cali, there's some students on the East Coast and in the Midwest as well.
Great. Well, the Midwest, it's where I'm from. I grew up in St. Louis, like I said, and I have to say, for the majority of my adult career, my goal was to be outside the Midwest and experience the rest of the world, because I didn't travel that much as a kid. My dad's from Hong Kong. I'm actually not, I don't have history in the Midwest. My dad's from Hong Kong. My mom's from the US. And I grew up in St. Louis just because my dad got a job there. So I was kind of only tangentially, I guess, associated with St. Louis in the first place. And all my friends had these deep, deep roots in the Midwest. So they were always sort of destined to come back, I guess, even if they left for college and stuff. Like the majority of them have. Okay. I'm trying to catch it every time I freeze. So yeah, there's the familiarity problem when I was growing up, where I felt like everything around me was boring because I knew it too well. But what I realized traveling is that every exotic place, every place that I think is unthinkably, unknowably exotic, whether it's Bali or it's, northern India or whatever, you get there and everybody there is itching to go somewhere else because that other place is exotic to them. So they're thinking, oh man, I wish I could go to Missouri and, take photos of like water towers and, cows or whatever. To them, that's exotic. My girlfriend's actually from Hong Kong, and she thinks that manual car washes, with the pressure washer, she thinks that's sort of an exotic thing. She's fascinated by it. She's fascinated by yard sales, garage sales, secondhand thrift shopping, things like that. Because in Asia, or at least in Hong Kong, new clothes are much more popular. They don't like to reuse clothes. It's not as cool as it is, or it's sort of trending, but it's not as established as it is here. So a lot of these things that I guess I grew up and tried to get away from, I'm starting to realize they have a lot more layers of interest to other people that I've met. And it gives me a new perspective coming back to the US. And watching shows like Stranger Things, I realized that actually, something that was so familiar to me in the past to the point of being boring now can be portrayed as nostalgic and fascinating in that respect. There's a retro appeal to it. There's a feeling of home when I see images of the Midwest. And I just saw this awesome video on Vimeo, and I don't know if I won't be able to find it again, but it was about just a young, awkward boy in the Midwest who had a crush on his brother's girlfriend. And it was just a very slow-paced, nostalgic kind of Stand By Me-ish short film that was shot with a customized large format camera, where they took some cinema camera and they fitted it with medium format lenses. So everything was very hazy and like super shallow depth of field, and they gave it a film stock look with lots of grain and lots of warm sort of amber sepia tone. And watching that short film, I realized that even though that film wasn't set in the past, because it sort of focused on the less urban parts of the Midwest, it really tapped into a sense of nostalgia for me, and I felt really connected to it. Even though it's set in 2019, it had this universal, timeless feel. And that's one thing that I feel like the Midwest really has going for it cinematically is the okay. Am I back? I'm back. Okay. I don't know where I dropped off, but it's that, I don't know, quintessential Americana thing. I mean, I guess that's one aspect of the Midwest that now appeals to me more than it did back in the day when I was, spending all my time in the Midwest. So I know that's like one little slice of everything that you could film or tell a story about, or create media about in the Midwest. But to me, currently, that would be probably the most interesting. And of course, there's all the news about Black Lives Matter and the protests and all that stuff raging in the foreground right now. But I don't really consider myself a journalist, and I don't want to make films about what's immediately happening right now, the topical events, because I feel like once that passes, then I don't know. I just feel like it's too topical. It's not really. It's not what I'm personally feeling like inside myself. You know, I feel like I would be making a film about other people's experiences, and I guess I'm selfish as a filmmaker. My films are about how I feel when I go to a place and I experience it. So if I were in Minneapolis and I were personally experiencing Black Lives Matter and the protests from like a front row seat, then maybe I would be filming those things. But since I'm currently in Albuquerque, New Mexico, surrounded by family and desert and, you know, trees and rocks, and like none of that's happening right here, then I don't feel like I can bring the authenticity to a story, a topical news sort of story like that in my films. So I'm rambling. I don't know
That's good.
if anyone wants to rein me in and bring me back to any particular topic, but yeah.
Hi, Brandon. Thanks so much for your talk. Yeah, and Sam shared a lot of your videos, and I think we're all super impressed by your work. I guess like my thought is like I was wondering, can you explain a little more about like how that balance of planning a video as well as like kind of letting that experience shape what you're filming? I know
Sure.
you mentioned like you planned you know, on social media basically before what you wanted to film, and it seems like a lot of it is planned, but do you let kind of like other things change how that is? And also I was curious on like it seems like what I really admire is that it looks really real because you also get to like experience like people's houses you go into. Like how's that process, and is that like do you use any like actors or stage to like portray what you want to portray, or is it more of like I just want to observe? Yeah, that's like.
So my biggest fear is a blank Word document as I try to come up with ideas. That's part of why I started getting into travel videos in the first place. I am horrible at sitting down and writing. Actually, during my quarantine, I've tried to write fiction from scratch, and I have written stuff, but it's a bunch of rambling nonsense, and I haven't even completed a single scene because it feels so unnatural to me to not work from the world. So I guess everybody has to find what keeps them productive. It's not just it's not just a matter of like creating something great from scratch. Like not all of us, I guess, can create from scratch. And so for me, I loved being able to touch down in a country, grab my camera, walk out, and just start filming and start making the film the moment I get there, and finding my direction as I go. So usually the process is like this. I start with the social media, like I said before, making some arrangements to meet up with people when I get there, trying to have conversations before I get there. And then when I arrive, I check into my hotel room. I usually take a nap or something. And then I try to go out before the sun goes down around sunset with my camera and just walk around the neighborhood, not paying attention to like any landmarks that I'm supposed to visit or anything, and just grab footage, B-roll, I guess, of what's around, and get a feel for it and sort of, you know, breathe it in and see how it feels to actually be there. And that starts to get ideas going in my head. And then I mix those ideas with what people tell me when I meet up with them, what the locals tell me. And you know, as I meet locals, I ask, okay, you say this is interesting. You say, you know, mukbang is interesting in Korea. All right. So do you know anybody who streams mukbang? And they'll be like, no, I don't know anybody, but my friend knows somebody. And then I say, okay, can you put me in touch with your friend? And, you know, they put me in touch with their friend.
Oh, I can't hear you. I think you're
Is there a
muted
problem?
now. Oh, there you go. I can hear you now.
Okay. So basically what I tried to say was I work through degrees of connections with people, and everybody, like I don't hire actors for any of my travel videos. That would be ridiculous. I take real people who are willing to be on camera, and I use them for as much time as they're willing to give to me voluntarily. and I make the most of that time. So in the mukbang example, actually, I never ended up, this is a real thing. It's in my Soul video. There's a mukbang scene where someone's streaming mukbang. I could never end up finding a real streamer, but I found somebody who was the friend of somebody who did mukbang, and we sort of recreated like a mukbang type little home studio in a room. We put up props. We created a fake like laptop with streaming camera and like lights all over the place, Christmas lights like you would have in one of those, you know, for like a YouTube channel, or what do they have it? What do they call it? The Korean equivalent of YouTube. So we created a fake set with somebody who wasn't an actor, but they were like the friend of somebody who did streaming, and we created what it would sort of be like. And we just spent a few hours filming that little scene, and then I put it in my video. And it was planned that I would do something like that from the first day I got to Seoul, but it took us 3 weeks to realize it. And I was working around the availability of other people. And we just kind of, you know, kept in contact over a few weeks until finally all the pieces landed in place. I had somebody to film, I had a location to shoot at, we had a clear concept of how the shot was going to go. Because in the final film, the shot's actually connected to several other shots with transitions. So we see somebody watching a stream, go into their phone, watch somebody streaming, circle around that person who's streaming, and then zoom out through another phone to see that another person is watching them stream. So it's a really long, fluid shot that took several weeks to conceptualize and execute. But it was basically all in the back of my mind as I was shooting other stuff over the course of that month that I spent in Seoul. So that's, I guess that's the art, I guess, or the craft that I've mastered over years of making these travel videos, is having a basic shape to the thing in my head, like a big fuzzy shape, and then plugging in the pieces of it randomly, sort of whenever I have the access to the people I need to execute those pieces. And it's a very non-linear sort of it's not a very organized way of doing it, but it works in my own head. And I don't know if everybody would thrive on that kind of filmmaking, but it's what keeps me going. It's very exciting for me. Yeah, I don't know if that answered the question. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just improvisation. You know, you can improvise a film. I don't know if it works so well for narrative, but definitely for like travel videos and stuff where it's just like a big montage of stuff. And it's like, here's a bunch of cool stuff. And I put it in an order that sort of feels like a story. You know, I shot a month of random footage and I edited it as best I could to make it all feel contiguous. You can definitely improvise a video like that. Can you improvise Inception? Probably not.
Anthony, you had a question?
Yeah. So with the way you describe your filmmaking as like on the spot, improv, how do you pay attention to small details, or do you pay attention to them at all? Like, how do you incorporate like minor details into like the whole picture? If
Give me an
you know
example
what,
of a detail.
like when you're giving a mukbang, like, oh, you know, it's like this one detail that all Koreans do. I can't really give a specific detail, but like you notice something. Like, how do you incorporate that into your video piece?
Well, in that case, I mean, there's a lot of tropes. There's a lot of like sort of cliches that we could incorporate, like having not just one instant ramen, but 4, you know, having like an extreme amount of food. So that was something that we wanted to incorporate. And the Christmas lights, that's just a common streamer thing, you know, low budget set dressing for the background. And having like colorful little doodads or anime characters or whatever, like toys in the background. So in that case, like there was a bit of set design and we could just sort of play off of the tropes that everybody would expect from that kind of stream. But in other examples, I try to just go for a cross section. I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but I think of everything as sort of like a big, like a grid, like an XY, like a formula. So you have, you know, you have young, you have old, you have maybe happy, sad, you have ancient, modern, like all these spectrums. So when I'm visiting a place and I'm trying to make a video about the place, I try to cover the ends of each of those spectrums. Something very ancient in Tokyo, like a temple, something very modern, like high-speed train, or like, you know, something high-tech. Old people, young, you know, little kids, tradition versus progression, you know, maybe, I don't know, a cliche example, maybe like Harajuku fashion versus a Shinto wedding. So trying to capture the ends of the extremes at least gives me contrast that I can work with when I edit. And when I try to capture those extremes, I try to capture what makes them unique, or what the audience would likely identify, because there's a lot of muddy middle ground when you're traveling and you're experiencing a place. Like, let's just take the Midwest of the United States. I'm not gonna like focus on a Schlotsky's Deli or like a Quiznos, because that's everywhere. They all look the same. Unless I'm telling, you know, a very special story where I can make that feel unique. If I were making a travel film about the Midwest, I would try to focus on stuff that is more along the bell ends of the spectrum. And I hate to say the word cliche, or like, you know, but it is kind of the cliches, I guess. You start with that and then fill in the shades of gray after that. And, you know, just try to find the details of those things that make it identifiable to somebody who maybe has no prior experience with that culture. So yeah, I like to think analytically about things. I like to think like, okay, so we have Turkey, and Turkey has these ends of the spectrum. Hagia Sophia is the traditional end of it, and something else would be the modern end, and I can't think right now what that would be. But you've also got, just within Istanbul, you've got two sides of a river. One is Europe, one is Asia. Okay, so what defines the European side of Istanbul? What defines the Asian side? How are they different? And what can I use as the most obvious example, like to somebody who has no idea what Turkey's all about, what Istanbul is all about? How can I make it very clear, even to that person, this is the European side, this is the Asian side? So I look for those really obvious things. Once I've gotten the obvious stuff, I try to fill in the less obvious stuff so that there's some nuance to it and it doesn't feel too cliched. So obvious stuff, for instance, obvious stuff would be the whirling dervish dancer, right? That's very obviously traditional Turkish. The guy with the hat who's like spinning in the white, like the white skirt. The less obvious stuff might be a traditional shoemaker or a cobbler in a neighborhood in Istanbul. And I made a video about Turkey about 5 years ago. I had both those elements. So we have the daily life stuff that doesn't scream Turkey, but it still has the feel of Turkish culture. And then we have the really obvious stuff that you would see on a poster for tourism for Turkey. And I try to mix them. So there. Anyone else want to ask a question?
I have a question, and
Sure.
this is a little bit more of a technical question, but how do you do all of those wild camera movements? And are they all practical, or are some of them computer generated?
There's no CGI. There's a YouTuber, Ben TK, who does actual CGI in his travel videos. I don't know if you've seen his stuff, but I don't do that. I don't know how to do it. I can't actually like texture map and like, you know, animate CGI. So my stuff is all, it's all based on real camera moves, real footage. And I usually just add some digital zooming or some masks on top of that. So the trick to it is to do something practically. For instance, pushing the camera through a window, and then in post, replacing the window with a transparent layer. You know, the inside of the window, you just mask it out and you make it transparent. And then combining that with another camera move that's also pushing forward at the same speed. And that's the trick. The speed has to match, the direction has to match. And then you create a mask to let one shot, you know, melt into the other shot. And I try to create shots where the portion where that mask is on screen is as brief as possible, because it's really time consuming to do those masks. So I try to have like the camera maybe pan over to the window and then push in, so that I have part of the shot where there's no mask over here. And then I pan over and you see a window, and then the mask is there because that window is made transparent by the mask. And then I push through. But the tricky part about that is the shot that I'm transitioning to has to also have that same camera movement, pan over, push in, right? Otherwise they're not going to match perspective wise. So when I'm shooting, I do a bunch of similar shots with similar camera movements because I don't know exactly how I'm going to transition everything, but I call it giving myself an in and giving myself an out. So for instance, instead of just shooting a shot where I'm in a room and the camera is just slowly tracking like this, I'll start with that camera behind, I don't know, behind a lamp or something, and it'll move past the lamp, and then you'll see our little scene in the living room, and then it'll keep moving, and maybe it will move into, like, it'll pass a window, or it'll go toward a window. So I've got an in where I pass the camera lamp, or I pass the lamp, sorry. I've got an in where I pass the lamp, and I've got an out where I pass the window. And I could choose to use the in and the out, or just the in, or just the out. And then if I combine that with other shots where the camera's moving in the same direction at the same speed, then I've got a lot of editing options, even though I didn't plan it specifically in advance. So you use constant direction, constant speed, and for each shot, you give yourself an in, you give yourself an out. And then in editing, you have a lot of ways that you can combine them.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, hope that was useful.
I just sent a message really briefly, just like based on the same question.
Oh yeah,
I noticed that you have
rotational
the,
roles.
yeah. Do you usually do that in camera? I thought that was really cool. Like, is that?
No. Hold on. Did I freeze up?
I can hear your voice.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're frozen.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. So
now you're frozen. I think you're back, but now I can't hear you. Nope, not yet. Talk again?
okay.
Oh, you're back.
So you missed my geek joke, or maybe you heard it, but yeah, basically you need a very high resolution camera to do a roll and have it not have to zoom in too much, because the sensor is wide on most cameras. So once you get past about maybe 15 degrees of roll, then you start having to zoom in the image a bunch. So usually the rolls are, the geek joke was I have to wait until I get my Blackmagic 12K camera to do those rolls in camera. But actually that's true though. If you have that camera, your roll that you do in post will be literally exactly the same as it would be if you were rolling it on set. There's no difference, because a roll is a two-dimensional planar move. It's not a three-dimensional move. So it's just like panning and tilting are planar moves. Those are not, there's no z-axis, there's no parallax. So basically, if this is your camera and you're just going like this with the camera, that's the same as panning it in post with a higher resolution image. And rolling is exactly the same way. So if you have a high enough resolution camera, or if you're exporting to a low enough resolution, like maybe it's just for Instagram, you can do your rolls in post. But I've always had to do them with my gimbal practically, because I'm just shooting 4K. And if I have to zoom in for that roll, then it will be essentially like a 720p image or less. So yeah, it's real difficult to get those rolls perfect in camera. And usually I do a whole bunch of takes.
Yeah, and on the technical end, Brandon, you've worked in TV as well. So you've worked with different kinds of cameras. I think with the YouTube generation and with the growing kind of technology to make cameras smaller, it's unlocked different ways of expressing things through film. And I showed the interns a clip of Yasujiro Ozu's Tokyo Story, and back then, of course, you had these big monstrous things as cameras, so it'd be really difficult to do anything remotely like what you're able to see in travel videos these days, that now everybody is doing, because they have these 4K cameras the size of your palm. So I wonder if you can speak a little bit to kind of what you see in industry and how technology has really shaped the way that stories are being told these days.
Well, aesthetically, I think that filmmaking is a lot like music, where the highest end of it is always the highest end look. The premium look is always analog. Just like with music, we still want it to sound analog. We still use tube amps or tube amp simulators. We still use analog synths that cost $100,000. Like, why are we doing that? We have these plugins that, can synthesize way beyond what a Moog could synthesize in the 80s. Why? Because, well, that analog sound is still high end, and that's what you're going to hear in a multi-million-dollar album, either that sound or a recreation thereof. So we have filmmakers like the Mulan film that will come out probably in the year 2030. That film, they used a lot of like 90-year-old lenses or something. There's some really old lenses they used to create an antiqued look in Mulan, even though of course they had access to RA super primes and whatever you call those, master primes, the most expensive lenses on earth, and they were shooting 65 millimeter equivalent digital. Chris Nolan still shoots on film. There's a reason for this. It's because analog, big cameras, heavy cameras, huge lights, that's the high-end look, and that's not changing anytime soon. If you want to light a scene, congratulations, you can buy an LED chip on board light for $1,000 that outputs a ton of light, but it's not going to look like an HMI. It's not going to look like a 12K hot light that burns like the sun. Even though it's much more convenient and it's much more affordable, you will get a different look. There's a reason that Roger Deakins still takes tungsten bulbs, like those regular light bulbs that you'll plug into a light, those hot bulbs that burst if you look at them wrong. He'll take a ring of those and create a giant O out of tungsten bulbs and use that to light a scene. He'll nail them to plywood and just create this monstrosity that's just impossible to move, and has 20 different power cables running to it, instead of just using a gigantic LED or something convenient like that, because it has that analog feel. And I think that's something to keep in mind as we move forward with technology. Yes, you can do anything, but it doesn't mean you should. Yes, the camera can move and you can have all these crazy spins and gimbal moves and transitions and blah, 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 blah in every shot. But when you start doing that, it's sort of like when DreamWorks CGI films have no sense of physics anymore, like Ice Age Part 8 or whatever, when they're just like, what, screw physics, we're just gonna have everything flying everywhere, the whole film. Camera's gonna be doing 360 loops the entire film because nothing matters anymore. We can do anything. Well, when you have no limitations like that, the audience loses their sense of grounding. And I think that works for storytelling, that works for aesthetics. You want to make things feel grounded in the world still. And that's one problem actually I have specifically with a lot of travel videos now, is that they feel so smooth and synthetic and everything's so perfect and grain free that I don't feel like I actually went to that place anymore. I feel like I'm seeing an Instagram photo that's just been animated. I feel like it's just, it's like an Instagram profile. And maybe some of my videos have fallen into that same trap. So I'm not going to say that I'm accepted from it. I'm shooting on the same digital gear as everybody else. But I think there's something to be said for grit and authenticity and just using stuff that feels real, like it feels connected to the world.
Someone else have a question?
I have a question, if that's okay. Frozen?
Okay.
Okay, are you unfrozen now?
Yes.
Okay. So hi, I'm Julia. Before I try to go to any new place or country, I usually do a lot of research beforehand to see what it might be like there. But a lot of the time I end up actually getting there and it's way different than what I thought it was gonna be. So what's a country you've been to that was just wildly different from what you expected?
Oh man. Well, I went to Mongolia in 2015 to film the Kazakh eagle hunters. I went to film actually a festival called the Golden Eagle Festival, which is held every year, and it's billed as a traditional ancient festival. And it took me months to plan this and a lot of money out of my own pocket. So it was a big investment. And when I got there, the entire festival was white 50-year-old men with Canon DSLRs and huge zoom lenses. And like like 20 or 30 eagle hunters on parade, like it was Macy's Day or something. It was basically a show for tourists, for photo tourists. It was all these wannabe National Geographic photographer guys. And they were like pushing each other, literally pushing each other out of the way to get their shots. Like I would be standing somewhere trying to videotape, you know, and trying to get like a close up of a horse or whatever. And some guy would just like jump in front of me or like give me a little elbow to the side so he could get his shot. And every time there was a break in the festival and everybody was just standing around, you know, like the eagle hunters would be sitting there smoking a cigarette or talking to their family, like a photographer would come up and start trying to like direct them and pose them and, you know, like frame out the other cars in the parking lots. There was just a sky in the background. And I felt sick by the end of that day. I did not even like myself for going there. Because I was like, you know what? I hate all these other guys, but it's also kind of like I'm sitting in traffic blaming the other cars. Like I'm one of them too. So what I did was I got the contact info of some of the nomads, the eagle hunter guys, and I arranged private shoots with them at home at a separate time, which of course meant more money. But it was worth it because I ended up making a short film that I'm pretty proud of, just about their regular life instead of this big festival. So I think what I learned from that is anything that you can discover easily with a Google search, so can everybody else. And you have to be prepared for that. Any landmark that you've seen in a bunch of other people's videos or photos or whatever, you know, Taj Mahal, whatever, anything that's trending, Troll's Tongue in Norway, you know, you go there, you're not going to be alone. You're going to be surrounded by everybody else who's able to find it just as easily as you. So it's a double-edged sword in being able to travel and find these places easily. You know, Bagan in Malaysia used to be a very difficult, inaccessible valley of temples that only a few privileged foreigners got to visit. But since they opened up for global tourism a few years ago, pre-COVID, it exploded. And now I see vlogs about Bagan all the time. I have several friends who've gone to Bagan. They would start off in Chiang Mai in Thailand and just hop the border and just, you know, it was like not even that difficult to get there. So now I feel like the game is sort of about getting the more personal stories, getting in closer. That's why I like to film in people's houses, because everybody's house is different. Everybody's face is different. Everybody's going through something different. So if you focus on the people instead of the places, and if you focus on the neighborhoods instead of the landmarks, then you'll find the unique stuff that nobody else has shot before. And you can dig as deep as you want to go. You know, the Taj Mahal, okay, you film the outside, you know, that's about all you get. But a neighborhood next to the Taj Mahal where everybody's living in the shadow of that tourism, now you've got a subject worth digging into. All those people, what are they eating? What are their families like? What do they think of tourists? What are their side hustles? You know, what is the standard of living of those people? So yeah, then you've got something you can get into more.
I had a question also.
Sure.
I was wondering, you know, you talked a little bit about how you kind of got into the traveling and have been to 40 countries, I think, right?
Yeah, about.
I was wondering, you know, part of my conception of Midstory's mission, at least, is kind of reframing the way we view Toledo and Ohio and places in the Midwest that maybe don't have as much of kind of a national or international identity as some of the cities that, you know, at least that were highlighted in the videos of yours that Sam sent us. I'm wondering if you have thought about bringing that type of work to, you know, your, you know, home region or to places like Toledo in the States, and what you kind of see as the potential of the work you do, you know, for reframing places in our own sort of space.
Sure. You know, I've thought about coming back to the US in general and shooting in recent times, probably more than ever before, because I've spent enough time outside that I could get a bit of perspective and it becomes more interesting to me again. And, you know, I think it's just very challenging to film your backyard as in the format that I do, in the sort of travel montage format, because that format kind of relies on somewhat like the exotic appeal. And if you're not a foreigner, then it can be hard to see those things. So coming back, you know, what I've thought I would be interested in filming is more urban stories, neighborhood stories, profiling people who have small businesses, local businesses, people who are are in a subculture or somehow counterculture, sort of the underbellies and the unexpected parts of familiar places, or places that I would consider familiar in the US. Like I grew up in a very just like, I don't know, very generic, I guess, suburb. Like I grew up in two places in St. Louis. I grew up in Baldwin, which is West County, which is new suburbs that were built, like, you know, McMansions that were built 2 years before people, you know, like everything was built at once very quickly. So even going back there now, if I were to try to shoot something nonfiction, like montage travel, I don't know how the hell I would do it. Oh, I think it froze up.
I can't hear you now. I can see you. Yeah, I can see you.
Hear me? Hear me?
Yep, there you go.
Okay. So, sorry, my connection's actually fast. I don't know why it's not working here. So what I have thought is I would want to do something probably either narrative, fiction, like completely fictional, maybe something drawing on my own nostalgia, or documentary, and just really zooming in on one person, one little story. You know, films like Moonlight that stay very close to their subject. I think that was filmed in Little Haiti in Miami. I could be wrong, but it was just a neighborhood, you know, and you never see the greater world outside of that neighborhood. And I love that insular feeling because you just get to stay so intimate with these characters and paint such a vivid portrait of a tiny slice of the world that most people will never get to see, even people who live in that same city. I've only been to Little Haiti, if I'm remembering the neighborhood correctly. I've only been to Little Haiti once, and I was filming for reality TV, and as I was driving through Little Haiti, someone shot a gun. It seemed like a drive-by, like either a drive-by or like a police raid or something. I heard a bunch of gunshots, and then my tire went flat. So I think someone shot out my tire, and I had to sort of drive my car as slowly as possible to a Subway restaurant. And I hung out in the Subway until some friends could come and pick me up. And my friends told me, don't go outside, no matter what you do. Even though you think you're safe in this little strip mall, don't go outside. So I didn't really get to experience the neighborhood. Like that was my experience. Like my car broke down, and then I got picked up by somebody else, and then I left. And then I saw Moonlight, and it gave such a deep, intimate portrait of, you know, a place that was kind of off limits to me. So I'm fascinated by those neighborhoods, and you could pick pretty much any neighborhood, you know, in any part of the US and create a fascinating story, as long as you get the perspective of those who actually live there. Like, what are you struggling with? What are you going through? What's changing? What is influencing your life decisions now? You know, what are your dreams? So I think it's a matter of really just talking to people, or looking inside yourself, or sitting down with your family and having a deeper discussion about your place than you've had maybe in a long time, and trying to view it with fresh eyes and try to view it from a dramatic perspective. What is the story that must be told here?
Thanks.
Sure.
All right, I think it's nearing 5 o'clock, so I've got 2 questions for you,
Sure.
Brandon, that circles back to the point that you made about your travels, and then I'll end with a question of my own. But the first one is, do you ever feel like, you know, as you talk about travel and you're talking about creating these images and travel videos, and you're capturing these things that people perhaps they want to experience of their own and they can't, or you're doing it for some companies. A lot of the times these images are being commodified, right? These images are being sold. And, you know, just having a critical eye, you know, your conversation about the Kazakh people and how in some ways they're commodifying their own culture, and that really shapes how they live their life on the day-to-day. Whether or not these images, there is some kind of detriment to cultural practice and traditions, and whether or not, you know, that really has any kind of effect or do you think that sometimes there could be, something detrimental that comes from revealing these images to the world?
It is an endlessly gray moral ground, and I have been very judgy about my own exploitation of those cultures, and in more recent times I've come to slap myself and say, I'm not them. They want this. Who am I to parent these traditional people just because I have some sense of Western superiority or whatever? Like, if they want to make money letting people take their picture, that's their prerogative. I'm not their dad. I'm not their boss. I'm not their leader. I have no control over them. All I can do is say, how do I feel about going there and using their image? So I think those are two very separate things that need to be considered by anyone who's a documentarian or a journalist or whatever. Just remember that no matter how unethical or amoral you see your subject to be, or the exploitation of your subject, the only thing you can control, the only thing I can control, is what I do. So yeah, they're gonna, like, when I showed up at the Kazakh eagle hunter's yurt, his gear, the tent that he lives in, he was reading a glossy magazine. I think it was like a men's shaving magazine or something. And there was a picture of him in one of the ads in the magazine holding his eagle on his hand. And he was showing it to his friend and he was speaking in Kazakh, but the general tone was like, dude, look at this shit. Look at me. Like, I'm a full page glossy ad here. And I'm sure he got paid handsomely for that shot. And he was just like loving it. He was loving the star power of it. And he wouldn't put the damn magazine away. And I was trying to film him in his like traditional life. And here he had this magazine, of his own face that was kind of ruining the verisimilitude of my film. So yeah, like, I couldn't judge him and say, dude, that's unethical. You shouldn't be like selling out your face. Like, whatever. It's his life. He was a 55-year-old man. He probably had way more wisdom than I ever will have. So if he decides that he wants to become a star, then cool. That's up to him. But I will not go back and film them again. I don't want to make another eagle hunter documentary, especially after like DJI did it to show off their new drones. And I think GoPro did it recently to show off like the Hero 8 or 7 or something. So yeah, that's getting a little far in the commodification spectrum, I think. They don't need me anymore.
And my last question for you, Brandon, before we close out, I get, as a kind of I would call myself an amateur, videographer. I play around with the camera sometimes. Sometimes when you're out about, traveling and things like that, sometimes I don't know if it's like you do this, but I kind of sigh when I look at my gear and I'm like, really? Can I just enjoy like the vacation, or can I just enjoy this time? And I know that that's your craft, right? I mean, you go out there and you make these videos, but I mean, what's that process like? I mean, is it something that you're like, it's just part of me, I don't even mind carrying a camera with me? Or sometimes are you just like, I'm sick and tired of this. This is work. I don't want to carry my camera around. Or what does that process look like for you?
Well, I'm addicted to shooting. I mean, I'm not going to like sugarcoat that. A lot of the time I film just because I just love holding a camera and pointing at stuff. I film my girlfriend washing dishes sometimes just because I want to hold a camera and there's nothing else for me to do at that moment. Or, I mean, there is stuff, but I'm avoiding it. So the same thing happens when I travel. I've got a camera with me. It's in my hand. It's awesome. It's got this screen that I can like touch and it will focus on stuff. And yeah, that's like an addictive video game, and it turns life into a game. And it's a great escape from the reality of, the mundanity of just existing. So should I experience stuff in a more like holistic way and put the camera down and view with my own eyes? Yeah, of course, everybody should. We should all throw our cameras away and we should all live in perfect harmony with like the oneness of the universe. But since we're all here talking about media, I assume we all have a bent to create it. And if you feel so inclined, I would just say, when you do it, go all in. Don't like, the problem is everybody's making boring stuff. It's not that people are shooting too much. It's that so much of it's boring. Like almost every video, if you take everybody you personally know all your friends, all your family, how many of them can make a video that you'd actually want to see? Test, 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 test. Audio, audio. Okay.
It's
Can you hear
working.
me? Okay. So basically that's my point is just really, it's like seriously think of everybody you know. And if they said, hey, I made a video, it's 5 minutes long, how many of those videos would you actually want to watch? So, you know, be the percentage that really digs in and tries to get stuff that nobody else is shooting, or, you know, like try to get beyond the surface of places, try to get like dig beneath the surface of your subject, try to get something that you really feel is worth watching, rather than just entertaining yourself by filming with the camera, you know, as a toy or as a diversion. Because there's a difference, you know, one hurts and the other is sort of a relaxing pastime, and the relaxing pastime yields boring footage. And the thing that hurts and feels uncomfortable, and you're saying, God, why am I even doing this? Why am I pushing myself so hard with this stupid video that nobody's going to watch? That's when you're doing it right. And I've, on all of my videos where I was eventually proud of how the video came out, at some point during the making of that video, I was always thinking to myself, why the hell am I putting in so much work, and my back is breaking, or I've been editing for 3 months, and why am I doing all this for something that, you know, nobody even cares about? And then it comes out and enough people care that I feel like it was validated. So yeah, I think it's about pushing yourself so that you're proud of what you end up creating, instead of trying to stop your impulse from creating.
You know, I think with Brandon's story, I think it really gives us good ground to continue doing what we're doing. Just, you know, we might be doing it in a different, you know, profession. You know, obviously we're not in the travel industry by any means, but I think with the storytelling and the journalistic aspects, as well as research that you guys are doing as interns, I think there definitely is a lot of overlap. So really appreciate the conversation today, Brandon. Really, I mean, I know you don't have a lot of time, so I think it's definitely, you know, it's a great way to have you on today. So if you guys could just give Brandon like a virtual round of applause, do appreciate the opportunity. And I'll make sure if the students have any additional questions, I'll shoot them your way. But again, appreciate the time. And interns, I'll see you guys tomorrow bright and early if you signed up for a one-on-one with me. So thank you so much, Brandon.
Thanks so much, everybody. Okay, take care.
Yep, take care.